Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Verleih und Frieden, gnädiglich, which translates to graciously grant us peace. This is another very fascinating chorale. I know I said in yesterday's episode that we were going to be continuing to look at the chorales from BWV 40. However, it turns out I actually analyzed the third chorale just because of the way they were printed in the anthology I was using before I started switching over to doing them in the order, in BWV order. So we didn't get to finish them sequentially, which is a little unfortunate, but that's okay because we have an equally interesting chorale today. A very lengthy chorale. I could not fit it onto one page. It's pretty much 2 complete pages, and it is very fascinating. There are some aspects of this chorale that are not easily analyzable, and we don't really have vocabulary to describe what is going on succinctly, at least. Like, we don't have labels, but we can do our best to try and get to the bottom of what exactly is going on. But yeah, we should get started. So we have 3 sharps in the key signature. We start on F sharp minor and we end on F sharp major. So I reckon we are in the key of F sharp minor to start things off. And I'll go ahead and mark our tonic triad first. We have a passing 7th in the bass. And then we have D, A, D, and F sharp, which is a D major triad in root position. We then have C sharp, A, D, and F sharp, but I think this C sharp's an accented non-chord tone, and it's this B that we're looking at here. And instead we have B minor 7 in root position, which is 4-7. We then have C sharp, G, C sharp, and E sharp, which is C sharp major in root position. That's a 5 chord. We skip up to the 7th of the chord in the tenor. We then get D sharp, A, C sharp, and F sharp. I think that actually does spell a chord. That is a D sharp minor 7 flat 5 in root position, which is a harmonization of the melodic minor scale. So that would be 6-7. We then have E sharp, G, and G as passing tones, which spell C sharp major again over E sharp this time. So we have a passing 5 chord, which is good because it goes directly back to 1, F sharp, C sharp, and A, F sharp minor triad. We skip down to B here and up to F sharp here. That F sharp's actually a chord tone, so let's not erase that, or let's erase that. Let's not mark that as a non-chord tone. We then have C sharp, F sharp, and G. This F sharp is a suspension or an accented non-chord tone over the bass. It's actually this E sharp and this B natural here that are our chord tones, which would make this a 5-7, C sharp 7 in root position. And then we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F sharp minor. So the first phrase is pretty straightforward, and then things start to pick up as time goes on. So the next cadence we have, I suspect to be an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of A major, and I think right off the bat we modulate to the key of A major via this F sharp chord, which is now 6. Sorry, I keep rotating the page. I have a tendency to do that in my videos, so thank you for being patient. We then have E natural, G sharp, and B, so that's an E major triad in first inversion. We then have F sharp, E, G sharp, and B, but I think this F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, and this is just another E major triad, but this time it's in root position, so we'll just change the figured bass. A, E, A, and C sharp, that's our tonic triad, A major, passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the melody. We then have F sharp, E, A, and C, and A, F sharp, E, A, and A. I guess technically what's going on here is that we have a F sharp minor 7 chord without the 5th. It is happening over sort of like a contrapuntal section. Every voice has their own rhythm, so it's kind of hard to pull apart an exact chord, but we do get some non-chord tones here if we do stick to that analysis, which I think we will. It does make sense that we have sort of a 6 in the bass here because we go to a 2-6-5 chord, which Bach loves is 2-6-5. D, B, A, and B, which would be an incomplete 2-6-5. The same way we're omitting the fifth in this chord, but we get the fifth here, so it gets added after the voice is tied over. And then we get E, E, G sharp, and B, which is our 5-chord root position, and then we cadence on 1. So even though this is an imperfect authentic cadence, we still have a pretty straightforward cadential formula here that we would expect. Imperfect authentic cadences, we get a number of different wacky combinations because the cadences aren't as grammatically strong, so we're not always reliant on a predominant followed by a dominant chord for the cadence. Now this third cadence is particularly interesting. I'm calling it a half cadence in the key of E major. That's just what it sounds like to me. The D sharp in the bass and the D sharp here is just a little too telling, but I don't know, you might hear this as an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of B major as well, or a plagal cadence in the key of B major as well, but I'm pretty certain it's a half cadence. It's just the way that I hear it. But what makes this particularly interesting is that we go here via F sharp minor. So I think this A chord right here is actually a pivot back to the key of F sharp minor. We get a passing 7th in the bass, and then we get F sharp, E, A, and C sharp. So it's interesting. This could be a tonic triad. I think this actually is a 6-7 chord. 3 does want to go to 6. But really it's a D major 7 chord, I think, so 6-6-5. And then we get G sharp, D, E sharp, and B, which is an E sharp minor 7 flat 5 over G sharp, which would be our 7 chord. It's 7 half diminished 6-5. We have some passing tones in the bass and the alto. That doesn't really change anything. And then we get E sharp, C sharp, G, and C sharp. It's interesting to see 2 dominant chords, or 2 dominant functioning chords back to back. And they're both in first inversion, which is kind of interesting. But the 5-6 chord does go where we expect it after this passing tone in the melody to F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is our tonic triad currently. And this is where I think we modulate to the key of E major. This F sharp's now our 2 chord. And this is actually a nice progression because after this passing tone we get the E natural, right? Which is indicative of the fact that when we see D sharp and E natural, that's kind of it's one of 2 things is happening. Either we have some modality going on and we're thinking in F sharp Dorian now rather than F sharp minor, or we've modulated or we're tonicizing something. And I think this 2 chord is fitting because we go to a 5 chord afterwards in the key of E major. We have D sharp, B, F sharp, and B with a passing 7th in the melody. So that would be 5-6. And then we go to our tonic triad now, which is E major, E, B, E, and G sharp, before we cadence on B again in root position, B, B, D sharp, and F sharp. And notice how the 5th of the chord is in the melody as well. That's a usual hallmark of one of Bach's half cadences in his chorales. But yeah, so this is where it gets kind of wonky because we have a perfect, or sorry, not a perfect authentic cadence, but a plagal cadence in the key of F sharp minor over here. But where is it exactly that we modulate? I think this D sharp, E sharp to F sharp in the alto is telling of the fact that this is a harmonization of F sharp melodic minor. So this B chord right here that we get before is now being recontextualized as the major 4 in the key of F sharp minor. And we get some passing tones in the upper voices, and I think this is pretty cool because B, B, E sharp, and G sharp spells a 7 chord. And granted, it is a 7-6-4 chord, but it is a passing chord, so the bass really doesn't have as much impact as if we saw it happening on the regular harmonic rhythm. This is like a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm. So we have 4 going to 7, and that goes to 1. So I think that's exactly what's happening here. And Bach uses major 4 chords all the time in minor keys, whether you look at it as mode mixture or whether you look at it as a harmonization of the melodic minor scale. He uses them quite frequently. But yeah, we go to F sharp minor here with a passing 7th in the bass. Then we have D, D, F sharp, and A, and we start to see a progression like we saw at the beginning of the chorale, passing 7th in the bass. And then we have B, B, G sharp, and B. Oh wait, sorry, B, D, G sharp, and B. That would be G sharp diminished over B, which would be a 2-6 chord in the key of F sharp minor. Then we go to C sharp, E sharp, and A, but I think this A is an accented non-chord tone, and actually what we're looking at is this G and this B here, so this is a 5-7 chord. And then we go to D, A, F sharp, and F sharp, so we have a little bit of a deceptive progression going on here because we would expect to go to 1, but instead we go to 6. Then we have this interesting line here. We have A sharp, E, F sharp, and D. And if we look at the upper 3 voices, we have the makings of an F sharp major chord, which would be the like 5 of B, which happens before it, right? Because we have the C sharp, which is an accented non-chord tone, and then we have B, B, D, and F sharp, which would be our 4 chord in root position. And of course it's a plagal cadence, so we cadence on our tonic afterwards. But we have, you see the upper voices here. This bass keeps us from analyzing it entirely, but notice how we have this chromatic passing tone here, and this tritone. It's not a tritone, it's a diminished 4th, right? No, that is a tritone, A sharp to E. Yeah, so we have this is like the 3rd and the 7th, and we have the root of the chord, but this D throws us for a loop. So even though the 5 of 4 is being implied here, we don't really have all the makings for me to put it on the page, but it is good to acknowledge. It is good to know the fact that's what the voices are doing here. And then we have another cadence in the key of F sharp minor again, and it happens here, and the fermatas just did not make it into the final document. Apologies for that. But we're still in the key of F sharp minor. However, I think there's an argument to be made over the beginning of this progression here, because I think you'll see after I do it. I don't say that we fully modulated, but maybe we do, I don't know. We have E, G sharp, E, and B, so we know that that's a 7 chord, or some people might call that 5 of 3, and the reason why is because it goes to 3, and because we see the leading tone more often than not on the harmonic rhythm for 7 chords, right? We see more diminished 7ths and major 5 chords than we do major or flat 7 chords. This is often treated as a secondary dominant, even though it is diatonic to the key. But it does in fact go to 3, so 7 still wants to go to 3 via the cycle of falling 5ths too. So we have 7 going to 3, A major. Then we have G sharp, B, E, and B, which is another 7 chord, but this time it's in first inversion. And then we have the A and the C sharp and the E here, in the same way that this 5 of 4 doesn't ever fully realize because of the lack of change of bass. We can't really say that a full 1 chord happens here, even though it's being implied. And then we go to B minor, B, D, D, and F sharp, which would be a 2 chord, or sorry, which would be a 4 chord in the key of F sharp minor. So this is the opposite of the way that it's supposed to go. 4 usually goes to 7 via the cycle of falling 5ths. However, this is an example of what I've been calling in my videos a transitive progression, where if one chord can go one way, why can't it go the other way? The voice leading should be just as smooth. It just takes you further away from the dominant, which is in some cases okay, because some chords inherently want to go to the dominant, like 4 for example. But I don't think that that's exactly what's happening here. But if you wanted to analyze this section in the key of A major, it'd be very easy. We would just call this 5, we would call this 1, and we would call that 5, 6. But I think by the time we get here, we have F sharp, G sharp, and A in the melody, and that it just sounds like we're in the key of F sharp because of everything that's preceded it. We've really had a mostly F sharp minor melody up until this point. But this part right here sounded pretty A major in quality, even though we could analyze it in F sharp minor. So we have some activity in the upper voices. We have E, G sharp, B, and B. That's kind of like a passing 7 chord. Maybe we should mark that. We do have 4 going to 7, 6, 4 earlier, but this is 4 going to 7, 6, 4 diminished. Here's 4 going to 7, 6, 4 as a flat 7. So I don't know, maybe it's worth analyzing because that's where the chord wants to go. And then we have A, C sharp, F, and A, so it goes to a tonic triad, F sharp minor in first inversion. Passing tone on the bass. Then we have C sharp, F sharp, and G. So we have an interesting chord here. I was about to say that was a 1-6-4 chord, but that's wrong in my notes. This F sharp is actually a suspension, a 4-3 suspension over the bass, or an accented non-chord tone, depending on how you look at it. And this F is also just a neighbor tone. So this is really just implying a big 5 chord, and we get a delayed 7th here, and the resolution happens on beat 2 before we get our perfect authentic cadence in the key of F sharp here. Alright, last cadence on the first page is an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of A major, and we're looking for a point in which we modulate. Now we immediately get F sharp again afterwards, but it doesn't really sound like we've modulated until we get the E natural going up to A here. So I think that we actually don't modulate on this F sharp, even though we're going to modulate on the F sharp afterwards. But this F sharp over A here, A, C sharp, and F sharp, I think is where we modulate. That's just where it sounds like it modulates to me. So we'll just call this 6-6 instead of 1-6 because we're now in the key of A. And we have another passing tone in the bass. Then we have C sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and E. And we have an example of another sort of transitive progression. 3 wants to go to 6, typically speaking. So the fact that we get it going the other way, I don't know, it's interesting. It goes against what I learned. Then we have an accented non-chord tone in the bass. We have D, F sharp, D, and A, which is a D major triad in root position, which is a root position 4 chord. Then we have C sharp, G sharp, D, and B, but I think it's this C sharp that's an accented non-chord tone, and it's actually B, G sharp, D, and B, which would be G sharp diminished over B, which would be 7-6, and it makes sense because 4 wants to go to 7, so that's good. Yes, so then we go to A, C sharp, and C sharp, which is a tonic triad with no third and a with no fifth, apologies, and a doubled third, but it still goes where we expect. But he leaps down to E sharp afterwards. We get E sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and B natural, which is C sharp 7 over E sharp, which would be 5-6-5 of 6, which is interesting because, I mean, we've seen this chord a number of times in the key of F sharp, but the fact that we're getting it in the key of A major sort of explains the fluidity between A major and F sharp. There are instances where it really feels like we're in the key of A in the middle of an F sharp phrase, so there's this fluidity between A and F sharp and sort of the dynamic between moving between them interchangeably. It's actually a pretty modern sound, all things considered, but I think really it's more so just a byproduct of Bach imposing or projecting a harmonic narrative on a melody that has a particular it feels mostly like F sharp minor, albeit not always. But that goes to a 6 chord like we would expect, F sharp, A, C sharp, and A, so 6. Then we skip down to C sharp, which is the 5th of the chord, and that goes up to D, D, A, F sharp, and B, which is our B minor 7 chord over D. Bach loves his 2-6-5 chords. That turns into root position here, so we have B, A, F sharp, and B, so we don't get a third. So I'll just change the bass there, or not the bass, the figured bass. Then we get E natural, G sharp, E, and B, which is a 5 chord like we would expect, following a 2-6-5 chord, and then we cadence on 1. And of course, these imperfect authentic cadences are imperfect authentic because the melody doesn't contain the tonic, it contains the third of the chord. Okay, moving ahead, so we kind of have to look to the next page for this, but we have another cadence in the key of A major. In this case, it's a perfect authentic cadence. But this last chord on this page is B, G sharp, B, and D, which is a G sharp diminished triad in first inversion. So that would be 7/6 in the key of A. And I'll go ahead and move this to the side. And now we are on the last page. So we have C sharp, A, E, and C sharp, which is a tonic triad in first inversion. That's A major. Then we have D, A, F sharp, and B, which is B minor 7 over D, which is 2-6-5. Kind of interesting to see in the middle of, oh, actually, no, this is a relatively short phrase, so we're getting ready for the cadence here. So C sharp is a non-chord tone. Then we get E, A, E, and B. So this A and this F sharp are both decorating the G sharps. They're like surrounding it, right? So this is really just a suspension or an accented non-chord tone, depending on how you look at it. That's really just implying 5. And then we get the 7th of the chord, D natural here. And then we get an anticipation here in the melody before we cadence on 1. So this is just a long sort of dominant, well, long relatively to the harmonic rhythm of just dominant. And Bach does that with some regularity. All right, next we have another cadence, and this one's interesting because this is an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of F sharp minor. However, notice how the 5th of the chord is in the melody. That's pretty unusual. Not to say that it can't be. We can't have this. We definitely can. It's just typically with imperfect authentic cadences, we have the 3rd of the melody, almost always. So when we see the 5th, like I said, that's usually a hallmark of a half cadence, but not an authentic cadence. So when we get an authentic cadence where the 5th of the chord is in the melody, it's definitely interesting. But I do think we straight away modulate to the key of F sharp minor because we do have this E sharp in the bass here, which immediately hints at the idea of a dominant. So I think this A is our common chord. It's now 3 in the key of F sharp. Then we go to E sharp, C sharp, G, and C sharp, which is C sharp major over E. It's a 5-6 chord, and that goes to 1, F sharp, A, and C sharp. Tonic triad in root position. Passing tones in the upper voices. And then we get something kind of interesting here. We get this delayed F sharp here and this delayed E here. Then we get, let's see, we have G sharp, D, F sharp, and B. So that G sharp minor 7 flat 5 in root position would be a 2/2 diminished chord, so just 2-7. And then we get A sharp, interestingly enough, A sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and C. These passing tones similarly to how we had on the first page, actually. Let me pull that back. Similarly to this situation right here, where we get the A sharp and the E and the F sharp, but we don't get the C sharp in the bass until it's delayed down here. But at that point, the rest of the voices, or the inner voices, have recontextualized the harmony. So here we're actually getting 5 of 4. Yeah, it's just a 5 of 4 this time. Apologies for the sirens. But we have 5, 6 of 4 here, because F sharp major is the dominant of B minor, or just B in general. Then we have B, B, F sharp, and D, which is our 4 chord like we would expect. And then what makes this imperfect authentic if we have a 4 going to a tonic triad here? Well, we have G sharp, E sharp, D, and B, which is E sharp minor 7 flat 5. Oh, sorry, it's E sharp fully diminished actually, because we have D natural, not D sharp, over B, so it would be 7, 4, 3. So 4 going to 7 is a sub for 2 going to 5. They both more or less do the same thing. It's the relationship of the cycle of falling fifths, and it's a predominant going to a dominant functioning chord. Okay, now we have probably the first very interesting phrase, like exceptionally interesting phrase in the chorale. So we have a perfect authentic cadence at the end in the key of A major. And what better way to introduce the idea of A major than to have a dominant pedal for basically 2 complete measures, right? We have E, 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 which is pretty cool. So I think we're straight ahead, right in the key of A major, and we'll call this 6. We've pivoted using those common chords A and F sharp many times now in the chorale. And when we analyze over a pedal, I'm just going to go ahead and write E pedal here, and I'm going to mark it for as long as I need to. So like to there. And then we have an E pedal. And the reason why the pedal is important is because the pedal is consistent. It's not always a chord tone, so it really doesn't affect the inversion of the chord too much. So I don't really mark the inversions when I'm analyzing over a pedal. It doesn't really make too much sense to me to do so because we have such a deliberate pedal. It's kind of operating on in its own lane while the rest of the voices are contributing to the harmony. So we have an E pedal going on here, and we start off with an E chord, right? So E, B, G sharp, and E. It's a 5 chord in the key of A. We skip up to B natural, and then we have E, G sharp, and C sharp, but I think this, or sorry, E, B, and C sharp, but I think this B is an accented non-chord tone, and actually what's being implied here is E, A, and C sharp. So this is just a tonic triad, and you're going to find that even over this pedal, it's a lot of tonic and dominant chords. So here we have E, A, and D. I think this A is an accented non-chord tone, and really what's being implied here is E, G sharp, and D, which would be 5, 7. And then we get E, A, and C sharp again, which would be a tonic triad. And then we get a neighbor tone, another neighbor tone, and a passing tone. Let's see if that spells anything. We have a D, G sharp, and B. That does spell something. I guess we could, over the whole pedal, call that 5, 7 again. Yeah, might as well. Let's just call that 5, 7 again. Even though the upper voices are spelling a diminished triad. But what is a 5, 7 chord if not a diminished triad with an E in the bass? They're the same thing. And that goes to C sharp, A, and C sharp, which is a tonic triad. And we have some passing tones going on here. C sharp, B, and B. That doesn't really spell anything. And then we have A, C sharp, and C sharp with a passing 7th in the bass. So that's just another tonic triad. No need to reanalyze. And then we have F sharp, C sharp, and D. And depending on how you look at this, you might call it a 4 chord, but I think this F sharp is a non-chord tone and this C sharp is a non-chord tone. And really what we're looking at is G sharp, B, and D, which would be another 5, 7 chord with the E in the bass. When the E does, when it's a chord in root position and can be fully spelled with the E, that's the exception that I make. However, otherwise this would just be a 7 chord, but they're ultimately achieving the same thing. They have the same crunchiness, but with the bass will inherently affect the sound of a diminished triad because it would make that a completely different chord. Well, not completely different, but it will make it different enough because the E fits with it. All right, and then we're out of this pedal section. Very interesting to see a pedal for this long. We've seen a couple of pedals before, but not in regular harmonic rhythm like this. We usually see them in the chorales that have like a decorative, sort of like a coda section where it's just this long held tone, and I think it's usually been in the melody. So we have F sharp, A, and C sharp. That is a root position C sharp, F sharp minor triad with a passing tone in the melody. And then we have G sharp, B, E, and E, which it's another E major chord, but this time it's over G sharp, so that would be 5, 6. And then we have A, E, and C sharp, which is a tonic triad, A major, and root position. And now we're getting ready for our cadence. So we have D, A, F sharp, and B, which is our B minor 7 chord in first inversion. Bach loves his 2, 6, 5 chords. E, G sharp, E, and B, which is a root position E major triad, which is what we would expect after a 2, 6, 5. We have a passing 7th in the alto before we cadence on A major, A, E, C sharp, and A, which would make this a perfect authentic cadence. And we are almost to the end of the chorale. It's very exciting. These two cadences are probably the most interesting parts of the chorale. I would argue that they are the most interesting parts of the chorale. They're very unusual cadences, and I don't really fully know what to call them, but we will talk about it. So I think we stay in the key of A major until the end here, but we cadence on B minor of all chords, this E being a suspension over the bass, a 4/3 suspension, but it's not super obvious what's going on here, but we'll take a look regardless. So we have A, E, and C sharp. That's just another tonic triad, but because we're on a new system, I will reanalyze it. Passing tone in the bass, and then we have C sharp, A, E, and C sharp, so that's just taking the chord and putting it in first inversion, and then we get a revisitation of root position with this figure that we see from time to time, this bass figure we do see in the chorales, 1, 2, 3, 1, and sometimes we see it transposed, sometimes we see it altered, but this bass figure we see from time to time in Bach's writing. But here we have D, A, F sharp, and A, which is a root position D major triad, so 4, neighboring 7th in the bass. Then we have D, B, F sharp, and B, which is a B minor triad in first inversion, passing tone in the bass, and then we have F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A, which is a 6 chord, or in the key of B minor, it would be like a minor 5, because really, what do we call this? Chorale. I don't really know what to call this cadence. I think it has aspects of like a deceptive cadence in it, but maybe it's also a plagal cadence. I don't really know exactly what to call it. But this F sharp chord, we will call it 6, which is sort of like a deceptive progression, because we expect 2 to go to 5 or 6 to go to 2, but usually not 2, 6 to go to 6. But then we have G sharp, B, E, and G sharp, which is a E major triad in first inversion, and I think this is where we're going to say we modulate to the key of B minor, and we're going to call this E major chord now 4/6, where we get a passing 7 in the bass. Remember, when we have 4/6 going to 1, and this is another cadence where the 5th of the chord is in the melody, so we end on a tonic here, but we do so via connecting the bass and the tonic with the leading tone. So that's what makes me feel like this is more like a plagal cadence than anything else, but it does not sound like we've really modulated. It really sounds like we're still in the key of A major, but you know, because this is the most succinct way to do the analysis, I'm going to leave it this way. I think it's a very valid analysis, but all in all, it's still very confusing. And the next cadence is just as confusing, actually. So, yeah. Okay, so I think we're still thinking in terms of A major here. And this B minor triad in root position is actually 2 as well in the key of A major. And here we get C sharp, G sharp, C sharp, and E. So we get some adjacent harmony, 2 going to 3. It's a pretty unusual progression. We see it from time to time. It's not like unprecedented or anything, but it's kind of unusual. And then we have C sharp, A, D, and F sharp, and depending on how you look at it, that might be the chord we go for, but I think B, B, D, and G sharp is actually the chord that we're going for, so that would make it a G sharp diminished over B, which would be 7/6. Yeah, 3 going to 7, also an unusual progression, but not unprecedented. It's just one of those transitive progressions. So if the chord can go in one direction, it should be able to go in the other direction as well. And then, of course, the 7/6 chord goes to A major, A, C sharp, E, and A, which is our tonic triad. And then we're getting ready for this unusual progression. So we cadence on D major, but we do so via, we have B, D, and F sharp with B in the bass. So that would be a 6 chord, or sorry, that would be a 2 chord in the key of, that would be a 2 chord in the key of A major. But if we looked at this in the key of D major, this would be a 6 chord in root position. Or, yeah, because we have the B in the bass, it would be a 4/6 chord in the key of D major would be, it would involve a G natural. So the reason why I liken these two progressions together is because of the fact that they have 6 in the bass. This just happens to be a 6 chord, and this happens to be a 4/6 chord, but they both have a passing 7th that makes it feel sort of like a plagal cadence, if not an imperfect authentic cadence, in the same way that we have, it's still on this page right here, where we have a 4 chord going to a 1, and if we redacted that passing chord and only looked at the regular harmonic rhythm, it would be a plagal cadence, but that passing diminished triad or diminished 7th chord, or it's fully diminished. This passing diminished 7th chord implies, dominance, so it makes it an imperfect authentic cadence. But I think that these are, if anything, mostly plagal cadences because of the fact that we have 6 going in the bass, and then connecting with the 7th going to the tonic. Because we don't have the complete chord, I guess technically speaking it's not an imperfect authentic cadence, but this is why the idea of like a cadential spectrum I think is really important and something that I advocate for in analysis, because of the fact that the chord is clearly implied. Bach is thinking about connecting the 6 to the 1 with the leading tone, because the leading tone plays an integral role, but all in all, these are very similar to one another. 4/6 to 1 is much more, 4/6 to 1 via this 7 is much more common, but a 6 going to 1 via that leading tone is also effectively doing the same thing, because what's the difference between 4 and 6? It's just one tone, right? 6 in the key of D major is B minor, so that's B, D, and F sharp, and 4 in the key of in the key of D major is B, D is B minor, and then 4 chord is a G major triad, so they both have B and D, just the difference between the other 2 tones is a 7th part, so, or a half step even in this case, so it is 6 going to 1, which makes me feel like this is a plagal cadence. But, the idea of the fact that we expect another chord afterwards makes it feel deceptive as well. The fact that it's a chord being connected by the leading tone gives it aspects of authenticity. I don't know, it's really just a nebulous concept, and the fact that we have 2 back-to-back with one another, he's like exploring the idea of the submedian, or the supertonic and the subdominant in the key of A major, which is very interesting. Okay, now we're moving ahead to the last cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F sharp minor, and I think we straight away modulate to the key of F sharp minor, and this D chord is 6. We get A, C sharp, and E, which is a 3 chord. That's a transitive progression, right? We would expect 3 to go to 6, but here we are getting it the other way. That's okay. We get A, F sharp, C sharp, and F sharp, which is a tonic triad over A, or in first inversion. Passing tone in the bass, we get D, B, C sharp, and G, but I think this F sharp, or I call this D, F sharp, B, C sharp, and G. That's just like a chordal harmony almost. Actually it is B to F sharp to C sharp to G sharp, or flip that around. But here we have E sharp, B, C sharp, and G, which is a C sharp 7 chord over E sharp, so that's 5, 6, 5, which makes a lot more sense. We have F sharp, A, C sharp, and A. That's a tonic triad in root position. F sharp minor. We have B, B, D, and G sharp, which is G sharp diminished over B, which is our 2 chord. That would be 2, 6 because it's in first inversion. Then we have C sharp, E natural, actually, which is interesting. So we have this passing 10th here in the 2 voices, but we would expect a 5 chord afterwards. But we don't get the E natural here. We don't have the D sharp and the E sharp, or sorry, we have the E natural here, not an E sharp. So there's the idea of the minor dominant here. But then we go to D, A, F sharp, and F sharp, which is a root position D major triad, 2 going to 6 again. Another transitive progression. He's like doing the cycle of ascending fifths rather than falling fifths. We have a passing 7th in the bass. We have B, G sharp, and F sharp. That's kind of an interesting chord. I think even though we have the makings of 2 on the downbeat, we would expect a diminished 2 chord, and with the absence of the 5th, it doesn't quite feel as complete. We've seen some 5thless implied diminished 7th chords in the past, but I think really what's being implied here is A, F sharp, A, and F sharp. So I think this is actually just a tonic triad in first inversion, but I don't know, maybe a 2 chord could be implied here. Who knows? Maybe we'll just put that there, 2, 6, 5. But without the 5th, the dominance, or sorry, not the dominance, the diminished quality of at least the triadic portion of the chord is absent. But we have B, G sharp, D, and F. There is our 2, 6, 5 chord in its entirety. So I think really this is just like a contrapuntal section, like all the voices are moving very actively. Bach loves his 2, 6, 5 chords, passing tone in the tenor. Then we have C sharp, B, C sharp, and E sharp, which is an incomplete 5-7 chord, no 5th, but with major triads, the 5th isn't as important as it is in a diminished triad for the sake of conveying the sound. And of course we cadence on 1. And in the case of minor chorales, we get a raised 3rd, the Picardy 3rd, as opposed to a minor triad. Oh my goodness, that was a very lengthy chorale. All in all, super fascinating. I think this modulation scheme, or these 2 cadences following one another, made the chorale very fascinating to analyze. But all in all, the fluidity between A major and F sharp minor, just the visitation of E major here through F sharp minor instead of through A major is kind of interesting as well. And kind of the use of, major 7, or I call them major 7 chords, but I really should be calling them flat 7 chords. Here is also very interesting. The fact that they're sort of local to this progression makes it feel like the melody's operating in some, like, I don't want to say bitonal, but there are definitely elements of F sharp minor and A major happening simultaneously, which is kind of hard to reconcile when you're analyzing on the page, which is why the videos are actually really helpful, because I can talk about these things in a nuanced fashion, just say, well, actually there's more going on here than what I mark on the page. But when I mark it down on the page, it's because I think it's the most likely analysis based on my looking at the chorale. But on that note, we have been recording for close to 43 minutes now, so this is probably the longest chorale we've looked at, if not definitely one of the top 3. Thank you so much for watching the video and continuing to support the channel. I really enjoyed making these videos, and these long chorales like this are definitely a mental workout, but it's why I do this sort of thing. And thank you for continuing to support the channel by watching these videos. It really means the world to me, and I look forward to tomorrow's analysis. I hope you take care.